Okay, we've just been listening to the governor of Louisiana along with FBI officials and local officials here in New Orleans. We've learned a lot of new information. I do want to start that the number of dead has somewhat changed. They're now saying there are 14 victims who have died in this terrorist attack, and the 15th was the terrorist himself. I also want to point out something that's happening right now. You see a lot of construction vehicles here behind me. We have some video. I'm going to ask the control room to roll as well. They are now setting up barriers along Bourbon Street because the mayor, as NBC News first reported, is set to reopen Bourbon Street about 36 hours after this terrorist attack happened. We understand it's going to open at 2:30 local, 3:30 Eastern, just before the start of the Sugar Bowl. Officials saying they feel this area is now secure. My colleague Gotti Schwartz was out there on Bourbon Street witnessing them putting down the barriers. They're also putting them at the corner of where that terrorist jumped the curb and got onto Bourbon Street. So essentially on the sidewalks as well. They are reinforcing Bourbon Street. And a lot of people are going to be asking why they didn't do this before New Year's Eve, why this had to be done after 14 people were killed in that terrorist attack. We are also learning from the FBI that they now believe this is somewhat of a lone wolf attack. They are now saying they do not think there are co-conspirators anymore. Again, the investigation is fluid, but they do not think there were other people, at least not here in New Orleans, who helped them out to pull off this attack. They say that because they're now telling us there were 2 IEDs they located, pipe bombs that were essentially in coolers along Bourbon Street on one location, Orleans, which actually is a few blocks ahead of where the terrorist attack ended, and that people were walking by and noticed the coolers, and they thought possibly they were connected, but they're saying they don't believe these people are connected anymore. They do want to talk to them, though. Inside the coolers, they found some wires. They found what looked like bombs and nails. They think these might have been remote devices. They believe the terrorists planted these bombs right after midnight, sometime between 1 and 2 a.m., before he drove down Canal Street, where we are, jumped the curb just behind me, and started that attack on Bourbon Street. They also said, as of right now, they don't think there's a connection with the attack in Las Vegas, right? There was that Tesla Cybertruck that blew up outside the Trump Hotel in Las Vegas. As of now, the FBI says they do not see any clear connections here. They're also still investigating the Airbnb house here in New Orleans. The FBI is still there investigating. They found 2 laptops, 3 cell phones that belonged to the terrorists. That's what they're saying. There was also a fire there, and they now believe that possibly was started by a timed bomb that went off after the terrorists died. I want to go to Tom Winter. He's our NBC News law enforcement intelligence correspondent. Tom, talking about other things that stood out for you from that press conference, because we just learned a lot about what has happened over the last 24 hours.
Sure, Tom. So we heard from Christopher Rea, who's a Deputy Assistant Director of the FBI's Counterterrorism Division. He's based out of FBI headquarters. Just a coincidence. He actually grew up and is from the Houston area, which is where this suspect is apparently from. And so he has a lot of experience, not only with terrorism investigations in that part of the country where you are, in the Texas region, but also was one of the people involved in the investigation. He mentioned it, Boss Bomb, which is the FBI code name for the Boston Marathon bombing investigation. So we brought a sense of timeline to us that we didn't have before. Let's get to that. On December 30th, apparently this suspect picks up the pickup truck that was used in the attack. On the 31st, so New Year's Eve day, he makes his way from Houston to New Orleans, and along that trip, starting after approximately 1:29 a.m. local time, he begins recording a series of videos, 5 in total, according to Rea. These videos talk about his desire initially to kill his family in the name of ISIS. He talks about his allegiance to ISIS, but he didn't think that would garner enough press attention, so he turned his sights, and Rea talked about it later in the press conference, to this idea of specifically targeting Bourbon Street. So it's 5 in total. He also left behind a last will and testament in the course of recording those videos. You referenced it. At that location in New Orleans, they recovered 3 cell phones and 2 working laptops. The IEDs that they found, they were able to go back and look at surveillance video and actually found that he placed them there. The question is whether or not they would have been remote detonated, that they would have gone off by him triggering something. We've seen that in other terrorist attacks. It is in terrorist propaganda on how to build those. The key word that he said, they are, quote, confident that he acted alone in this attack on Bourbon Street. So that's definitely a change in this investigation from what the FBI ASAC talked about yesterday. And that's after they reviewed some of the video and were able to kind of narrow out individual suspects. And you alluded to the people that were looking at these coolers on Bourbon Street. And as you mentioned, a couple hours after midnight is when apparently he laid those out, and obviously before the attack. Another key quote from this, he says, quote, he was 100% inspired fired by ISIS. So the indication at this point, he says, in looking at cell phone records, and what they'll do is they'll actually go back and look at everybody who's called him and everybody that he called in order to determine who's he been talking to and what's been going on. And they also can take an initial look at those cell phone messages. And his own videos are obviously going to be very helpful here in this investigation. Putting all that evidence together, what Ray is telling you here, Tom, is that they have gotten to a point in this investigation where they think, one, he wasn't directed by ISIS abroad, and two, that he was acting alone, with the caveat, as you mentioned, coming right out of that press conference, that it is early in this investigation. One last thing I'll mention, the quote on Las Vegas is there is no definitive link so far, but it's very early in that investigation between what happened at the Trump Hotel, the explosion of a Cybertruck, and what happened in New Orleans yesterday. There are evidentiary coincidences between the two. There are active searches that are going on for the individual that rented that Cybertruck, his home in Colorado. There's active law enforcement activity in the Houston area where the New Orleans suspect is from. But at this stage, there's no definitive link between the two. Again, the big caveat that these things change over time. And the challenge for law enforcement these days, these phones that we have, Tom, they collect so much data, so much information about us and our movements. It's tough to sift through.
All right, we thank you for that, Tom. I want to bring in Tim Gallagher. He's a former FBI special agent in charge of Newark, New Jersey. Tim, I first want to start with Bourbon Street, right? They're going to reopen Bourbon Street 36 hours after this terror attack that killed so many people. Is that the right call?
Well, sure. Thanks for having me on. And you know, like when we spoke yesterday, it's New Orleans is going to be one of the safest places in the country to be right now. It on lockdown, and having been in cities post attack, it's the sense of vigilance of everybody on the street, law enforcement, and not living in fear. Like let's conduct the investigation. Eye towards keeping the focus on public safety, but let's move forward.
Tim, I do want to ask you, it feels like the terrorist had some type of training, right? He seemed to know a lot about explosive devices. He seemed to have figured out a plan. He seemed to have known how to pull this off. Do you think someone can just get that from being radicalized online by ISIS, or do you think it has to be something more in depth as far as training goes to pull off something like this?
Well, we've seen this over the last 15 years. Individuals based in the U.S. becoming radicalized. The materials are all out there online. These terrorist organizations such as ISIS, they put step-by-step instructions out there on how to put together explosive devices, how to conduct these attacks. This is nothing new. And then you combine that with some military training, which this individual would have received over the years. That would probably give him enough to pull this off.
Tim Gallagher, we thank you for that. I want to head over to NBC's Morgan Chesky. He's reporting live from Las Vegas. Morgan, I know you heard in that news conference the FBI is saying it doesn't look like there's any link between what happened here in New Orleans and what happened where you are in Las Vegas. But I know you have some new reporting about who rented that Tesla Cybertruck.
Yeah, Tom, we do. And of course, this investigation is still very fluid on both ends. That's what authorities are saying. But two senior law enforcement officials have told NBC News that they've identified a man known as Matthew Allen Livelsberger as the individual who rented that Tesla Cybertruck using the Turo car sharing app in the state of Colorado. What remains to be seen here, Tom, is if that individual, Livelsberger, was the one who drove it from Colorado here to Las Vegas and then pulled it right outside the Trump International Hotel yesterday morning, where surveillance video shows from multiple angles it exploded. That is one of the big questions that remains right now. Authorities only confirming that one body was recovered inside that Cybertruck whenever they went through the charred wreckage there. Among some of the other things they found in the vehicle, Tom, it goes to a crucial amount of evidence that they're building. It was multiple canisters of gasoline, of camping fuel, in addition to large firework mortars that can be purchased commercially that you can actually hear going off in the videos, whistling and exploding there whenever this all took place. Some of the other things we've learned here is that Elon Musk has cooperated with authorities to the point that they were able to retrace some of that Cybertruck's path from Colorado here to Vegas, Tom, by using Tesla stations. They were able to kind of pinpoint that path. We do know it arrived in Vegas around 7:30 in the morning yesterday, where the truck was seen driving up and down the Vegas Strip before it pulled in front of the Trump International Hotel around 8:20, detonating within about 10 to 15 seconds thereafter. That blast, Tom, injured about 7 individuals standing nearby. We know at least 2 of them were rushed to a nearby hospital, still awaiting to hear an update on their condition. We do know that the build of the Cybertruck essentially contained, at least somewhat, that blast inside. Authorities late yesterday saying that it could have essentially been much worse. But all of this with the caveat, Tom, that this is a very fluid investigation here. Tom?
Okay, Morgan Chesky with that new reporting out of Las Vegas. Morgan, we thank you for that. I do want to bring in Gotti Schwartz. He's been looking over at Bourbon Street just behind us now when they were putting those barriers down. Gotti, what else did you see?
Yeah, so you've got a crowd over there that's watching these barriers go up, and 2 of those barriers went up in the exact same spot as that truck jumped the curve going around the police car and headed down towards Bourbon Street. There are 2 barriers standing there, and there are people that are talking about where were these a few days ago? Where were these yesterday? So there's already this sense of, hey, if this is so easy to fix, why wasn't this done earlier? And now those barriers are going up all the way down Bourbon Street. There's about 7 or 8 blocks that they've got to put these barriers up. But we're looking at the timing at about 2:30 is when they want to open up Bourbon Street again, which is right before kickoff. So it looks like Bourbon Street's going to be reopening.
Yeah, to give the viewers some context here, at issue is those bollards, right? They were those stainless steel poles that essentially stand out in the middle of the street so vehicles can't pass through. They were all along Bourbon Street for years. They decided to replace them in a rush before the Super Bowl, so they took them all down, and there was nothing there. And as we've seen in the surveillance videos, as we've seen in the eyewitness videos, the terrorist in that pickup truck was able to just zoom down Bourbon Street and kill up to 14 people, as we now know.
And one thing that we heard yesterday from officials is that there are also those wedges that can be put up. They're temporary wedges that kind of raise and lower,
Right, those hydraulic lifts, yeah.
They were saying that they were having problems with them, mechanical problems, and so they didn't want to put those up in case an ambulance had to get in and there was an incident that happened where people needed to be transported out. But again, hindsight 2020, and people watching these things going up, asking the question that so many people have. If it's so easy to fix, why wasn't this done earlier?
Gotti Schwartz, first, I know you're going to continue your reporting and anchoring from here as well. We do want to mention that the FBI is asking for any help on this. If you knew the terrorists, if you had any interactions with them, they've received more than 400 tips, but they want to talk to more people because they want to understand why this man chose New Orleans, why he became radicalized, and why he decided to kill Americans. That concludes this special report. More coverage ahead on NBC News Daily and our streaming channel, NBC News Now, as well as online at NBCNews.com. And there will be much more tonight on Nightly News and on Top Story. For now, I'm Tom Yamas in New Orleans.
Thanks for watching. Stay updated about breaking news and top stories on the NBC News app or follow us on social media.